On today's special Sunday edition of AniMay18, your daily dose of anime every day in May, let's visit a blast from the past, the ancient biblical past, with
SuperBook, 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 SuperBook.
In some of my earliest childhood memories, I'm browsing the kids' video section in our church's library, and between the swath of VeggieTales and episodes of Gerbert and Bible Man, one VHS always caught my eye. SuperBook. Most likely the very first Japanese animation I'd ever seen. The character designs were so appealing and unique from the drab depictions in all the other Christian cartoons. And there was a cute talking robot and magical time-traveling books. What's not to love? SuperBook chronicles the adventures of Chris and his neglectful father, Professor Peeper. Good start. So Chris Peeper lives alone with his dad most of the time, and the professor's always bossing Chris around, like cleaning the attic and cooking dinner for him. Great family dynamic you guys got there. Thankfully, Chris's neighbor and best friend Joy comes around frequently to hang out and help Chris with his chores. While cleaning the attic, the two stumble across a glowing white light under a pile of books, to which Chris exclaims,
"Look at this! Did you ever see anything like this before?"
"What, you mean a book?" Apparently the SuperBook is some kind of genie Bible, because it only opens when Chris and Joy make a wish and promise to believe in it. The SuperBook is called the Time-Space Travel Book in Japanese. It just rolls right off the tongue, don't it? But it's basically a sentient time machine. And what's with all these Christian cartoons and time traveling? I guess it makes good enough sense for a modern audience, and I prefer SuperBook to the greatest adventure stories from the Bible with its time-traveling quicksand. Oh, wait, there was an ancient Egyptian portal? I always thought it was the quicksand. Oh well. One psychedelic fever dream later, the kids wake up in the Garden of Eden, and Chris's toy robot Gizmo grew 10 times taller and can walk and talk on its own. I'm sorry, his what?
It's Gizmo, my Crusader robot.
What exactly do the Crusades have to do with... Oh, never mind. While ogling the tastefully censored nudity of Adam and Eve,
all right,
the kids are overheard and have no trouble explaining to the first humans on Earth the concept of time travel, being their descendants from the future, what robots are, and what clothes are for that matter. It sure speeds things along. Wait, I guess God hasn't invented nipples or genitalia yet. This is a good time to mention the asynchronized character designs. The kids and Professor Peepers are totally different from every other biblical character in the series. Whether this was to differentiate the modern cast or stay in line with classical depictions is unclear. I'd like to imagine it's just animation culture, since this is what Japanese people look like in relation to Middle Eastern ones in this world. It's not spelled out whether or not Chris or Joy's families are actually Christians or they're just too young to really know Bible stories by heart. They seem to have basic knowledge of some names and places in the stories they get transported to, but never have the foresight to intervene until things go south. For instance, they leave Eve alone to be tempted by the snake, which is just special.
Strange, but I feel drawn to the forbidden tree.
Yeah, sure, whatever you say, Evie.
Why, it's a serpent, and I seem to be able to hear him talking. How is that possible?
Is that really the weirdest thing you've encountered today?
Simple, my dear. It's a mind-to-mind hookup.
That explains it.
Eve, I don't understand why you're doing this.
Because I'm your wife.
Okay.
Arthur.
So Chris, Joy, and Gizmo watch helplessly as Adam and Eve are cast out of the garden, and SuperBook goes, "All right, that's enough childhood trauma for today." Zip! And even though they spent the night in the garden, SuperBook functions on Narnia rules, I guess, because only an hour or so has passed in the present day. SuperBook promises to protect the kids and return them safely from their adventures, but then it makes this really creepy statement.
Of course. Can you keep yours?
Insinuating there was some unspoken pact between the book and the kids not to tell the professor about their adventures, I guess? There's no real reason they don't tell anybody, but each episode ends with a takeaway lesson for the kiddies. This one, I guess, is always do what your dad says, even if it's unreasonable. Honestly, it's about as good as I remember. The animation quality is pretty standard for 1982 anime, considering Tatsunoko Productions was the team behind Speed Racer in the 60s.
I've won the money! I won it!
The show was called Animated Parent and Child Theater in Japan. God almighty, where was the marketing team when they were drafting this thing? Each episode is usually a self-contained biblical story, primarily the Old Testament, with 3 episodes dedicated to the life and death of Jesus. Holy moly, why are Jesus' eyes so detailed? Must have some Japanese in his blood. Since Jesus' dialogue is so closely ripped from the text, he's also the only character I heard speaking in strong King James English, which makes him extra unsettling. Adam and Eve are so much more cash than this guy. As is typical, no one ever questions or apprehends Chris or Joy, and they're free to march up to Jesus' grave and waltz around in Joseph's private quarters in the Egyptian governor's estate and ask him all sorts of questions. It's all well and good, but sometimes, like in the case of Jesus' betrayal, the kids don't witness Judas' schemes, Jesus' trial, or even his crucifixion. What were they doing wandering around Jerusalem for 2 days when SuperBook can teleport them to any relevant location instantaneously? They can't or won't interfere with history and hardly ever have any revelations or input, so why the theatrics of time traveling at all? Well, because it's hard to spice up these old stories, especially for kids like me who heard them and read them 100 times already. My favorite parts were the before and after segments at Chris's place, or vicariously seeing the Bible stories through these kids' eyes and imagining being there myself as a child. For as shallow and simple as this show is, I still find it incredibly charming, and the amateur voice acting makes it even more enjoyable to watch as an adult. You never know when something awkward is going to happen.
Look at that big pyramid. Where could that be?
I'll bet that's ancient Egypt, Chris.
I mean, not like I'm going to watch any more of this anytime soon, but it was incredibly nostalgic to revisit it after almost 2 decades, and it remained just as clear as it was in my memory. So may the Lord be with you this week as he will be in mine until by his grace we're together again for another secular episode of AniMay18.